Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. We had some technical issues before the start of the stream. I actually wanted to maybe play some Vampire Survivors in the background as I used to do in the past, or maybe some of my other few games that are actually like play worthy during a live stream. We might get back to that maybe after some macOS betas. I'm not in particular blaming Steam, but all issues that I have had with my Mac in the last beta and in this beta have come from interactions with Steam. In this particular case, my OBS didn't want to work well. It gave me like a strange audio echo while recording. I didn't change any settings. I just restarted my Mac after it kind of crashed. And I can kind of move my cursor around, but that's it. So yes, I am back, and more than ever, I implore you guys to tell me what you're thinking of the audio and video quality, if there are any technical issues. I tested the video recording just right now. It should be fine. But you guys know I'm quite paranoid about it, especially when something goes wrong. This is especially bad because we already have so many nice people in the live chat. We have Riley, our number one yapper, KSB Wonders, one of our MarkTech Pro members right here on YouTube, discussing with Riley if there are going to be AI news. We have Angelica, one of our MarkTech Pro Max supporters. We have Benveni. So thank you to everyone who is joining. Thank you to anyone who's been joining over these last couple of days as we've been discussing the news directly from Apple, but also some other rumors, the benchmarks for the M5 Pro and M5 Max processors. Today, I want to react primarily to the latest Power On newsletter, of course, by Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, our premier source for everything Apple. Let me move my silver play button a little bit closer just for a little bit of personal vanity, because I always feel a little bit safer with it close by. Shout out to all our MarkTech Pro Max members, Angelica, Steve, Max, Maximus, and Jonathan. Shout out to all our MarkTech Pro members. Yesterday I redid the perks, so MarkTech Pro supporters also get a shout out. Shout out to KSB Wonders and Denise, our MarkTech Pro members, and then our MarkTech Pro Max members will also get a second shout out at the end of the video. So if you guys keep joining, you will make it harder for me to keep it all in my head, and I'll have to write it down, but that would be a wonderful problem to have. You guys know the drill. If you want to support this channel, subscribe, like, share, comment. You guys know I love interacting with the lively comment sections, getting all your agreements, disagreements, all your suggestions. That means absolutely the world to me. And of course, beyond all that, you can become a channel member right here on YouTube, a supporter over on Patreon, or while I'm live, you can send me super chats or super stickers, force me to read whatever crazy thought might be in your head, as long as it's safe to read out. Yes, thank you so much for the wonderful support over these last couple of days, and let's hope to keep growing our community. And of course, beyond all that, if you want to support me outside of the YouTube endeavor, join our Discord as well. You'll find the link to that and to my Twitter and to my Blue Sky whatever in the description of this channel. Without further ado, let's small Big Mark, and let's see what we have in store for you today. Today is probably not going to be a crazy like 3-4 hour stream, but it still should be nice and juicy, because my personal expectation was that Gurman would be mostly just summarize this week's releases. Obviously, the most important one being the new MacBook Neo, because of its $599 starting price, because it's a new device. Well, it's not a device category, but it's a new category inside of a category, right, for Apple. So it's a cheaper laptop. It has some unique compromises in comparison to other MacBooks. It does not simply get a slower chip or even a worse screen, but it has some different design quirks, different keyboards, different trackpads. So if you guys feel like discussing at some point whether you think the MacBook Neo is worth it, I know some people have been very aggressive on Twitter and other tech channels saying it's basically not worth it because of the $750 or $800 M4 MacBook Air. And I've seen also some people thankfully commenting on that in my Discord. I think it was Riley, who were saying that these people have a very US-centric view, like almost like exclusionary to everything else. Like these people forget that like not just third world countries, but even countries here in Europe where Macs are just a much smaller percentage of the overall market, like refurbished sales, even discounts, they are like still there, but they are far less common. They're usually not quite as aggressive. So I feel like whenever people are like, well, if you compare it versus the MacBook Pro versus the MacBook Air, minus 25% of its MSRP, I'm like, yeah. But at that point, why wouldn't you compare that to the MacBook Neo and its education discount or its discount after 3 or 4 months? Because don't forget, the M4 MacBook Air has been out for a year. What happens once the M4 MacBook Air is sold out? Because you recommended to all those people to go out and buy that great deal M4 MacBook Air, right? So, sorry guys, I need a snack. I've been eating up my calamari snacks for the last couple of days. So we can discuss that, but I think I also mostly gave my thoughts here already. But thankfully, contrary to my expectations, Mark Gurman did not just comment on the new MacBook Neo and the other Apple announcements. He also put them into context with what we should expect from Apple throughout the year, which is obviously the best way to cover this kind of stuff. So thank you from Mark to Mark, from Mark C to Mark K. Big appreciation whenever he actually drops at least a little bit of news, and we have a little bit of side talk for stuff like the HomePad, which has been called that kind of almost begrudgingly by the community as like a rumor. Interestingly enough, it might actually be, at least internally, the name of the product, so we'll get to all of that, I promise. And without further ado, let's get started. Apple has taken the wraps off its $599 MacBook Neo, entering new territory in a way that could shake up the computer market. At the same time, it plans to push deeper into the high-end with more Ultra devices. Also, the company aims to use 3D printed aluminum, or like this is the American one, this is aluminum, and it's refreshing the iMac with new colors. Last week in Power On, Apple's touchscreen MacBook will stop well short of a Mac-iPad hybrid. We, of course, reacted to this already. We commented on basically how a touchscreen is nice, but apparently it's not being designed to be like utterly transformative, and Mac OS will stay, at least in terms of what is the first class OS. It's going to depend on your trackpad or your mouse, and of course your integrated keyboard and all that stuff. So touchscreen is basically going to be a nice feature as a cherry on top. I'm not sure if there are any plans to give it like digitizer compatibility like Apple Pencil Pro or whatever. That hasn't been discussed yet. I think honestly, without a change in MacBook form factor, right? Like typing or drawing with an Apple Pencil on a hinge MacBook, ooh, that's just not going to be a great experience. I think the occasional type, the occasional swipe, I still think that MacBooks don't really need touchscreens, but I also understand Apple is trying more than ever to appeal to Gen Z, who have grown up with touchscreens on their phones and their tablets, and even if they end up barely using it, maybe by the time they consider buying a laptop, seeing that one doesn't have a touchscreen might actually scare them a little bit away. So this is unfortunately like, this is probably based on telemetry that Apple might have that we simply aren't privy to. So we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. I hope the touchscreen doesn't come with too many compromises. Obviously, a touchscreen layer I mean, sure, you can make it like an super expensive AMOLED with an active matrix basically right next to the pixels. But on top of, well, Tandem OLED is going to make it thinner, I guess, and then and over mini LED, and then touchscreen is going to make it thicker. But then a touchscreen layer also adds a little bit of extra reflectivity to the panel. So that might be a downside. But then for the people who are really allergic to reflection, for those people, Apple will want to upsell you on the nano texture version. So there will be some things to consider here. Brent Only saying, what are your main points why iOS Apple ecosystem is a better buy than Android's? Well, to me, I prefer the user interface. I think that Apple's user interface has always pushed the boundaries more in that regard. When I think about even the transition from like the home button to the full screen touch swipe input, I think about how Apple has just nailed it out of the box. And don't take my word for it, take Google's word for it, because there have been some full screen phones before the iPhone 10, not quite as full screen, but still something like the Galaxy S8, right? And around that time, Google started to push that kind of user interface also with their Google Pixels. And what happened was that everything they basically did for that first generation, they redid it entirely after the iPhone 10 came out, and basically copied Apple almost one-to-one, right? And I'm not saying that Google bad because at some point copied Apple. I'm just using this as one example where I feel like Apple's integration of hardware and software is much more thought out. And of course, their ecosystem is much more fully featured, right? You can like your Samsung Galaxy, you can even like your Galaxy Watch. If you really stretch it, you can like your Galaxy tablet. And hey, the latest Galaxy Buds are good, but this is, by the way, one of the most complete ecosystems in this in the Android sphere, right? When you look actually outside of it, most brands do not offer quite as fully featured of an ecosystem. And then you'll have to buy different devices from different brands, and then you'll have to install some third-party apps for perfect compatibility. You'll have to choose which apps you use to sync all your data. And even if you like manage all of that perfectly, that still leaves you without a desktop operating system, right? Between like your Android tablets, your Android phones, like your upper range at that point is Chromebook, and next year we might finally get Aluminium OS, like kind of like the merging between Android and Chrome OS that we've been promised now for so many years. That's why I'm also not 100% optimistic it's actually coming next year. And but then for more, you'll have to get Windows. And I don't have to explain to you how Windows is worse than macOS. Yes, Windows plays games better. Yes, some third-party apps exist on Windows, but not on Mac. But then everything else, in my opinion, is worse. The first-party app selection has been absolutely microslopped to death with the integration of Copilot and all of their AI bullshit. Drivers have become more and more of a problem as Microsoft has written more and more of their product stack on top of AI code, and then NVIDIA and AMD come in and they now write their drivers with AI code, and those codes clash, and then the next game you might want to run might clash with its AI written poor code. So that's one part of it. And then there are obviously details, like I always like Apple's designs, like this more simple stuff, especially on something like even the iPad. You can argue a lot of tablets nowadays are similarly pretty, but the iPad definitely was first, and it took like other tablets like 5 to 6 years to even offer something remotely competitive. I think with the Apple Watch, the user interface is super fast and responsive in a way that it took them like up until like 2 years ago to get there, where I think that even like I would compare like an Apple Watch Series 4, which launched like in 2018, versus Android watches, Wear OS watches, whatever, like that launched like 5 years ago. So big gap until a system is much more refined. Obviously, if you want to go even further, then you will look at something like Apple Vision Pro offering unique advantages. For me personally, my Apple TV and me using the remote app right integrated in Control Center on my iPhone is one of my most common use cases of how I leverage my ecosystem. My HomePod is connected to my Apple TV, transferring the audio from my PlayStation 5 over HDMI to my TV, and from there to my Apple TV, and from there through eARC. Well, eARC is the connection to the TV, but from my Apple TV through Wi-Fi and low latency to my HomePod. Uh, and to me, like, I have always commented, and you guys know that, for example, I used to own Android devices, and I still recommend people buy Android devices, especially if they're not already in the ecosystem. Like I recommend, I used to own a Galaxy S9 for years and years next to my iPhone XS Max, and I had fun. But then phones got even larger, right? 6.7, 6.9 inch screens and everything. They got heavier. Then they got a little bit of lighter because of titanium. Then they got heavier again, and then I just didn't. But thankfully their batteries got better, so I felt no reason to have both on me. Yeah, so that's roughly the story, guys. And of course, as always, small shout out if you. We have Rosa join the chat. If you want to really force me to react to something, make it a small super chat. A small donation goes a long way to supporting this channel. Become a channel member and make your chat text at me a membership milestone chat. So a ton of opportunities to support me directly and to get your voice heard right here. But let's actually read on. Just a few years ago, it would have been nearly impossible for Apple to build a product like this. Several developments helped make it viable. New manufacturing technologies lowered the cost of producing aluminium enclosures. The Apple A18 Pro chip from iPhone 16 became inexpensive. Yes, correct. I mean, the 18 Pro chip isn't even that much cheaper to make than the A19 Pro chip, right? I mean, technically, yes, with 8 gigabytes of slow memory, the package is cheaper. I'll grant you that. And if you want to take full advantage of the A19 Pro, you also pair it with faster storage. But overall, yeah, in terms of just them being N3E, them being around 100 millimeters squared, they're actually very similar. The reason why it got cheaper is because the amount of products that are worth putting it inside has, of course, dropped as A19 devices have come in. Apple has been stuck with some A18 Pro inventory, so they just put it in. Yeah, that's basically the explanation. If you ask why isn't it an A19 Pro chip, that's because Apple has great products, very profitable products that still use, of course, heavily use the A19 Pro chip. But also the fact that the MacBook Neo might sell like 5 million units a year, right? So the Studio Display XDR, yes, it might feature a completely overpowered A19 Pro chip, but then it might also be a heavily binned A19 Pro chip, right? Maybe half of its CPU doesn't work, half of its GPU doesn't work, but maybe its media encoder works and its I/O controller works, which are, of course, the more important parts for it. 12 gigabytes is definitely an overkill and definitely kind of a waste in the current landscape. But also don't forget the Studio Display XDR is probably in its lifetime not even gonna sell 1 million. So yeah, if you're wondering, I've seen some people debate why does Apple put a faster chip into the Studio Display XDR than into an actual laptop. That's why. And interestingly enough, that they need the A19 for the base studio display, but then the studio display XDR needs the Pro. I would have thought that with attached Thunderbolt controllers, both of them would be able to, both of those monitors would be able to be powered by the base A19 chip. So maybe there's some difference with the I/O controllers that really justifies it. I'm not sure. macOS has gradually been redesigned with more color and visual personality. Of course, that's with stuff like clear mode for the icons and things like that with macOS Tahoe, making Macs potentially more appealing to a younger audience. And this is why Apple is especially seemingly heavily advertising this device now, specifically on TikTok. So all of these things make total sense. These are not speculations. They're not leaks. This is pretty good analysis by Mark Gurman. Apple also benefited from earlier foundational shifts. Building a $599 laptop under constraints of Intel processors would have been extremely difficult. Well, it would have been a very cheap device in that regard, right? Either it's a somewhat decent processor still, but you pair it with like a plastic body and the worst screen and everything, right? But then because of the lesser efficiency, now you will need a bigger battery, which adds cost. You will need potentially active cooling, which adds cost and forces a redesign. So yeah, like I guess it could have used like an Intel Lunar Lake chip or even the lowest level Panther Lake chips, but it would have required compromises that with Apple's historically, Apple's industry high profit margins, it would have really been incompetitive with basically any other brand, right, that is willing to accept half the profit margin or less. The transition to Apple's own silicon, which, by the way, don't forget, happened less than 5.5 years ago. It happened late 2020. I know it might feel almost like a decade, or maybe like 5 days, depending on the day of the week, that Apple silicon has been out. But in terms of like the base M series chips, that's basically 5 years at this point. This is why we are on the M5 generation. So yeah, the fact that it took them a while also for A series chips, which are also Apple silicon, to be honest, right? I mean, if A12X doesn't count as Apple silicon, even though it's Mac-like in almost every way, minus maybe like a hypervisor accelerator, then I really don't know, right? And the Neo isn't Apple's only low-cost product, but the price gap between the company's entry-level Mac and the next tier is far larger than in other categories. This is one thing that I will disagree with Gurman on. The Neo is 45% or $500 cheaper than the MacBook Air above it. By comparison, the Apple Watch SE is $150 or 38% less expensive. That's just rounding at this point. I guess it could be like $230 and match that, but this I think is honestly silly. And the iPhone 17e is only $200 or 25% less pricey than the iPhone 17. This is technically correct, but also don't forget the actual Air in the lineup of the iPhone is the iPhone Air, and that is the $1,000 iPhone. And the iPhone 17e is actually priced, guess how much? 40% lower, right between this 38% number and this 45% number. The Mac lineup is also like, of course, if you compare the MacBook Neo to something like the Mac Mini, right, it ends up making sense, right? The Mac Mini is notably more powerful, which, by the way, the Mac Mini now is really overdue for an update because, and this is actually something that I predicted on my Discord, is that it would go up $100 in price, but with it come with 512 gigabytes of storage. And if it still gets the unbinned, so the fully enabled M5 chip, just as it got the full 10 9-core GPU M4 inside in the base configuration. That will make it really attractive at $699. And while yes, the $200 upgrades for more storage, more RAM, they might be still very high even by the standards of the current Ramageddon, but they look much more reasonable than they used to do in the past. And specifically for like AI bros who are really buying into that hype and everything, that might actually be now probably one of the best value products. I still don't think that you should be using a Mac Mini with 256 gigabytes of base storage, and especially with 512 gigabytes not being just more, but also faster. That's going to be even more impactful with AI usage. It's going to help load your LLM into your memory much faster. So a lot of good stuff here that will be happening, and thankfully something that Gurman comments on. But yes, this analysis is a little bit silly. I expect Apple to continue producing its other entry-level devices. It may even make sense to extend the Neo branding to those products in place of the confusing SE label. Here is something we actually agree. My suggestion for the next Neo product would be the next base iPad. The current base iPad is priced at $350. Make it even $400. Give it a solid A18 chip and make its keyboard like, try to bring the keyboard down to 150, and suddenly you have a product that with its keyboard will cost a little bit less than this MacBook Neo, which it will be necessary to keep that base iPad attractive. But then if you also make that iPad compatible with the Apple Pencil Pro, now suddenly with the keyboard case and the Apple Pencil Pro, it's almost $100 more expensive than the MacBook Neo, and it offers a more unique advantage. So I think Apple has a lot of potential here to leverage their pricing structure. People will still buy the Tandem OLED, MacBook Pro, iPad Pro just for the screens, the speaker quality, the maximum performance, all that stuff. So Apple can afford at this point, because of their addressable market is so large these days, to make their products much more competitive and their lower end products a much better deal than before. A name that really only resonates with people who know Apple's deeper history. But the MacBook Neo is still an outlier, not the start of a broader move toward low-end devices. That's correct. And I don't think that Apple is necessarily planning to introduce much lower cost devices in anything except for potentially like, if you count glasses as like a cheaper Apple Vision Pro, then maybe that makes sense. In fact, there's a more significant shift underway toward higher-end fare, what I describe as Ultra products, and it's a naming scheme that we've discussed obviously quite a lot on this channel. The company may not use the Ultra branding for all of them, but they've done so for Apple Watch Ultra, CarPlay Ultra, and their Ultra chips, and I think that's actually it. Let me know if I'm missing out on anything. That's the 3 examples that I would have given myself. I actually might have forgotten CarPlay Ultra, so respect to Gurman to remembering this very, very niche piece of software that Apple very technically supports. A number of upcoming items will fall will fall into this category, and then ironically, some of them are launching in the fall. The forthcoming foldable iPhone will be Ultra in the sense that it casts a shadow over the rest of the lineup thanks to its roughly $2,000 price tag. So that's something I actually put in the title. Like, I know Mark Gurman has previously commented on pricing. I know other leakers have given even more precise pricing, which I guarantee you they have no way to tell. Like, because of RAM, because of storage pricing, because of final configurations, like, I think there's very little chance that Apple has fully decided on a price. It could be as low as $2,000 because don't forget, the Galaxy Fold 7 is by MSRP like $1,900. I wouldn't be surprised if the Fold 8 might actually get $100 more expensive if we look at the Galaxy S26 family, right? So yes, $2,000. My personal speculation would be that it could be maybe up to $2,400 in its base configuration, but then I would expect it to have at least 512 gigabytes of base storage. It's rumored to have 12 gigabytes of RAM and only 12 gigs of RAM, no 16 gigabyte configuration, like for example what the iPad Pro does. So at least that is going to be somewhat price manageable. It's also going to utilize Apple's C2 modems. It's also going to utilize Apple's N2 or N1X modem. So those are going to help keep the price a little bit in check. But then it's using higher density batteries. It's rumored to have 5,400 milliampere hours or more, the largest battery in any Mac, in any iPhone, rumored to be even larger than the 51 to 5,200 milliampere hours that are rumored to come to the iPhone 18 Pro Max. But it's going to have a massive inner screen with like expensive OLED technology, with a very expensive hinge. He's saying new technologies like in-display sensors. I'm not quite sure what this refers to specifically, because under-display cameras and stuff like that are not part of the latest leaks for it. It also doesn't have under-screen Face ID, because this device, because of its nature and how it works, is going to rely on Touch ID. We'll have to see. Ultra may be what Apple ultimately calls this device, though it also could use a more literal name, something like Fold, for instance. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be Fold, just like Apple Vision Pro wasn't called like Apple Reality or whatever, right? It tried to distance itself from the other VR and mixed reality headsets, didn't call themselves glasses, obviously, because they aren't. But overall, I do get the point. Obviously, Fold is the most established branding in the lineup, and Apple has used branding that Samsung has done in the past. For example, Ultra, for like the Apple Watch Ultra. But that is a very different kind of product, and it does not feel like Apple copies Samsung when they call the Apple Watch Ultra Ultra. But if they call the iPhone a Fold, that will feel a little bit iffy, right? Samsung might have an Ultra in their phone lineup, but if Apple's Fold alternative is their Ultra, right? I feel like that just like it doesn't feel like copying on either side at that point. It's obviously completely different from something like the Xiaomi's um, adjusting their numbers so they at some point start matching the iPhone, so they can have like the Xiaomi 17 competing with the iPhone 17, and then they integrate Pro, which I'm fine with people using Pro. Obviously, Pro is not an Apple exclusive branding. Like my PlayStation 5 is a Pro. But then you go beyond that, and now they have a Xiaomi 17 Pro Max, right? And I'm like, bro, like, come on, you could be a little bit more subtle at this point. Apple's next generation AirPods equipped with computer vision cameras. Nope. So this is still Mark Gurman being the only guy insisting that these are going to have real cameras that are going to see your environment. We're going to have to see if he's correct. But I much more believe like the Chinese Weibo leakers and Min-Chi Kuo, who are saying this is going to have infrared cameras for stuff like gestures in the air to control it. So maybe it will lose like that control pad on them. But we'll have to see. Maybe Mark Gurman ends up being the only one correct. It's going to be a massive success for him if that's true. But it also still sounds so pointless to me. Like I can see why Apple would push health features that I might not need into AirPods, right? I have an Apple Watch. Okay, I don't need a heart rate sensor on my AirPods. But many people might start with an iPhone and AirPods before getting an Apple Watch, and AirPods are going to be their first way to interact with Apple's health app, to get a better understanding of their own health, maybe even detect some potential health issues, and then that might motivate those people to buy an Apple Watch. and all at the very low cost of integrating a heart rate sensor into those devices. That makes sense. Integrating actual like RGB high quality cameras that have enough resolution to actually see your environment and actually have some context clues about it, versus just taking out your phone with much infinitely better cameras, not constantly draining your batteries by having your cameras on a super tiny device, now having to make the processor much more complicated on AirPods, potentially having to integrate an image signal processor, or you will have to send much more data back and forth between the AirPods and the iPhone, right? So that the iPhone could actually be constantly processing that camera. Also going to be a massive privacy nightmare. We recently saw Facebook facing backlash because their Meta glasses sent private videos to their own employees to evaluate if they're like taking illicit photos or videos, right? Which means that somebody might have taken an illicit photo or video, but might have not uploaded it to the internet, might have not actually made it available to some creep online, but now some Facebook guy is gonna see those illicit photos. So the chain of terribleness in all of this is so stupid. But yeah, I really don't know if Apple will want to be like, oh, like you're standing at the urinal with your guys and now the guys have to worry about like your AirPods. Which way is the camera facing? Like if Apple hasn't integrated a regular camera onto the Apple Watch, I would be very surprised if they ended up doing so on AirPods. But what Mark Gurman mainly points out here is that these might not be labeled as like AirPods Pro 3.5, AirPods Pro Max, AirPods Pro Plus, or something like that. But maybe they will be the AirPods Ultra, which, funny enough, in terms of name, will actually put them above the AirPods Max, which are obviously over-ear headphones with better sound and everything. I'm also interested in what are actually going to be features beyond that camera stuff, whether it's IR camera or RGB camera. Like, is there going to be better sound quality? Are we finally getting an H3 chip, right? Are we getting a potential new design, whether it's for the case or for the AirPods? Are we getting a notable battery boost on top of the AirPods Pro 3, which already got a notable battery boost over AirPods Pro 2? So, guys, let me know what you think and if you would actually be interested. And what would happen to you if these had a regular camera? Would that increase the attractiveness of the product for you, or would it actually lower it like it does for me? Apple's next high-end MacBook Pro will feature a touch-enabled OLED display, a component that will almost certainly raise the overall price. When Apple switched the iPad to OLED, its starting price rose by roughly 20%. Yes, that was expensive. A similar change with the iPhone in 2017 pushed the base price to $1,000, which at that point was even more than 20%. Given that history, these upcoming laptops will likely sit above the current M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pro models rather than replace them. And this is something that I actually disagree with. Because when you think about it, the iPhone 10, yes, existed alongside an upgraded iPhone 8 and 8 Plus. Those were the successor products of the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus. When the iPhone XS came out the next year, what did that do? That did not exist next to an iPhone 9 and an iPhone 9 Plus. It existed next to the iPhone XR, a dedicated cheaper model. My speculation is that the M6 Pro and the M6 Max are gonna firmly replace the M5 Pro and the M5 Max in terms of chips, but I do think that they will keep the base MacBook Pro, the M6 version at that point, unchanged in design and screen. It will basically be designed kind of like the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus of its time, right? it will be just a direct successor to an already existing lineup, have small to no design changes, even though the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus actually introduced a glass back, but that was also partially because Apple eventually used that design for devices like the iPhone SE. So Apple obviously had some future-facing plans with that cheaper design in the lineup, with those older LCD screens and everything. That M6 MacBook Pro that I'm suggesting would be able to utilize, of course, the mini LED panels, the old design, the old battery, the old cooling system, the old keyboard, the old speakers from both the M5 and the M6 models. Right, Apple could, in a way, widen that price gap. That price gap is now already $300. If they increase the prices of the M6 Pro and M6 Max by $100, that will now be a $400 price gap, which, in my opinion, should be enough in most ways. Right. So I don't think that, like, maybe I could even see Apple try selling you the M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pro for a while. But honestly, like, if you look at that, the enthusiast market, everyone that I see online is saying, look, I'm really interested in the performance of the M5 Pro and M5 Max. I want a MacBook Pro that has more RAM than mine does. I want more and faster storage. I'm really excited for like that 1000 nits of SDR brightness. Maybe I even have a MacBook Air that doesn't even have stuff like ProMotion. That's these people, they're all still waiting for that Tandem OLED display, right? I am waiting, right? And I'm willing to wait potentially until M7, because I think all kind of early kinks of the first generation might probably be fixed, if there even are any, to be honest. Like my M1 M1 Max MacBook Pro was the first of its kind, but it works pretty much flawlessly, knock on wood, after all these years. So yeah, I don't think that Apple will actually keep these models in the lineup, at least not for long, but you can let me know if you think I'm wrong. But this is basically the like it already starts at $2,200. Like, do you really think people will consider not buying it if it's suddenly 23 or even $2,400? Because when the iPad Pro moved to like Tandem OLED, it came with 20% price increase, but its base RAM actually stayed the same. Its storage speed didn't change. Like if you look from like the M4 Pro and M4 Max MacBook Pro to the M6, right? Because a lot of people will not like update definitely from M5 and whatever. Like, think about it. Yes, it might be 20% more expensive, but now it's a multi-generational chip leap. It has better value in that regard, right? Especially if Apple gives it maybe some other perks. So I think that Apple will be fine without keeping M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pro. Also, don't forget, when Apple introduces an M6 MacBook Pro, the base version, right, that $1,700 version, they will be able to just say, oh, the M6, it's a 2-nanometer chip, gives you better battery life than any M5 or M5 Pro even. It gives you, well, at least on the 14 inches, right? Here it comes with the latest N2 modem, which gives you faster connectivity. Maybe it even gives you Thunderbolt 5, which was previously exclusive, of course, to the Pro and Max chips, right? Its storage would be as fast as in the M4 Pro and M4 Max, right? So sure, maybe not quite the PCIe 5x4 speeds from the M5 Pro and M5 Max, but still plenty fast. Maybe Apple gives us a little bit more memory, like maybe Apple probably isn't going to jump from like 16 gigabytes to 24, but maybe like an in between 18 or 20 gigabytes, especially if they switch to LPDDR6 memory. LPDDR6 memory does not work on 16-bit intervals. It works on 24-bit. So Apple would like if you look at it, like 72 plus 24, that's 96, plus 24, that's 120. If Apple goes beyond that, that will be 144-bit rather than 128. That will be more memory bandwidth with faster memory speeds. It could get close to the total memory bandwidth of on the M5 Pro. If they add 2 extra GPU cores and a new GPU architecture, it could compete with the M5 Pro, the binned version, the 16-core version. So yeah, there's a lot that Apple can do without that craziness, right? While Apple could keep the traditional MacBook Pro name, a MacBook Ultra label would be more clearly signal their position at the top of the lineup. One thing is certain, Apple yet again is moving firmly up market. And I do think, especially like on the 16-inch version, it just makes sense. I personally don't know anyone who has a 16-inch version with the M Pro chip. Everyone I know, granted, that's a very small amount of people who have a 16-inch MacBook Pro, got at least the binned M Max chip. Especially around the M3 generation, people got really interested for even stuff like Blender, because they got hardware accelerated ray tracing finally. They got a good new version of Blender working with Apple's Metal API. So I think that Apple has room to do some pricing shenanigans here. They could even do some slight downgrades in a way. Maybe they go with 756 gigabytes of base storage rather than 1 terabyte. Like, there is enough that Apple can do to save some money, or just make people accept a bit of a price increase. Don't forget, mini LED is actually not very cheap. It is relatively cheap for Apple nowadays because they've been ordering and using it for years. They've refined it a little bit with a quantum dot panel on top of that. But Tandem OLED is also going to be meant to be used for 5-6 years, right? There have been rumors that they might cut the battery capacity a little bit because 2-nanometer components and Tandem OLED are going to be so much more efficient than mini LED. So I hope they do not, but that's an option. So just making you understand, I think that these devices will be ultra in a way, right? I think they will be extremely attractive, extremely powerful. Just look at that Tandem OLED iPad Pro. It's still a screen with almost like unique advantages, right? 1000 nits of SDR brightness, pixel level control for that, while actually giving you high HDR brightness. That's something that OLED panels have struggled with at around that size for years. It's super efficient, right? It competes with the battery life of like 60 hertz LCD panels, while of course giving you on top of that ProMotion, that superior contrast and everything. And it absolutely destroys mini LED in terms of battery life. That's why on the 13-inch, where Apple replaced mini LED with Tandem OLED, they were also able to reduce the battery capacity. So why I'm mentioning that on the MacBook Pro, it's not just completely a guess. There is some precedent for it, but they actually improved battery life. So efficiency was so much better that they were able to do that massive jump. And of course, 2 nanometer is going to help, and 2 is going to help. Who knows if Apple decides to integrate that? C1 is going to be good. C2 modems are going to be efficient. We'll have to see. Is Apple moving firmly up market? Yes. Definitely. I also see the iPhone Pros and other devices in the lineup over time increasing its price, whether it's even on the base models or introducing new variants that are definitively more expensive. Like I think AirPods is specifically, like I think Apple has found this perfect price point of $250 because it's not just a good base price, but even on discounts, that's where it gets super crazy, right? At around $200, it's just absolutely insane, the value of AirPods Pro 3. But then on top of it, when you consider Apple wants more money. So if they put something into AirPods Pro 3 that might add $20 to the bill of materials, maybe slightly better sound quality, slightly larger battery, a new chip, right? But then they are able to price it $50 higher because all of these extra small changes pile up. Well, Apple will be very happy to collect essentially $30 more of profit from you. Are the way saying, hi Mark, hope you're doing great. I'm doing absolutely great. Guys, we're about an hour into the stream, if you don't count, of course, the early delay that we had because of my OBS issues. Thank you guys for joining. I'm doing really well. I've been enjoying my daily live streams this week very much, and I think I'm actually going to be streaming tomorrow and the day after as reviews come in for Apple's products that were announced last week. So if you want to see all of that, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. That way you'll know when I'm going live next. Like this video to help it grow, help it reach more people, help us grow the community. You can also grow our community more directly by joining our Discord. You'll find the link for that in the description of this channel. So I might, as always, just drop it myself as well. Of course, you can support me directly via Super Chat or Super Sticker to make sure I read out whatever crazy but hopefully safe message you leave me. And you can also become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to all our supporters. It means a lot to me. Ardway saying, instead of AirPods, I would suggest earpods for iPhones. Well, that's what earpods are. Like, I am not sure if you knew that. EarPods is the name for the wired ones. And I doubt that Apple would like to resurrect that name, especially since Air has this like historical connection to Apple's branding, right? MacBook Airs, iPad Airs, nowadays even iPhone Airs. So now I think they're fine with AirPods, and then they'll just find some Pros, find some Macs, find some Pro Max, find some Ultra to differentiate them. Ultimately, it doesn't matter that much. One recent report that didn't adopt the Ultra name is the Studio Display. That's true. That's actually something that could be a naming differentiation. But however, we already call it the Studio Display XDR versus the regular Studio Display. However, if at some point Apple gives mini LED to the base model, right? Because I believe Tandem OLED, Apple internally refers to as Ultra Retina XDR, right? So Super Retina XDR is their OLED branding, and then I believe Ultra Retina is their Tandem OLED branding, right? Apple Ultra OLED. Let's see how functional my brain is in remembering MacBook Pro with OLED, Apple Watch Ultra. What's the name of the tandem panel on the Ardway saying we'll soon get Apple Vision Air? That has been like very much in flux. Unfortunately, seems like it might not be happening the way like some people envision, but hey, I hope we do, right? And guys, beyond all the other YouTube chats that I mentioned, please leave a like. We have as many people watching as we help likes. It helps the chat tremendously while I do my research here, actually. Apple.com, iPad Pro. Just going on a complete side tangent. Take a closer look. Jesus Christ, is also like the website is beautiful, and I think it's perfect, right? It's not great for like quick lookups like what I want to do, but that's obviously not what it's designed for. It's designed to sell you on the iPad. Where's the screen? Like they have images of the screen, but they're really not mention it? Oh, here. iPadOS. Oh my God, do they not mention the chip for Ultra Retina XDR? Yay, I was correct. Give me money for being correct. No, just kidding. Yeah, Ultra Retina XDR. So if we are going by that logic, Apple could call the new base version, if it gets mini LED, Studio Display XDR, right? But then they could call the Tandem OLED version, maybe in 3, 4, 5 years, Tandem OLED gets cheap enough. I know some people in my community would absolutely kill and die for a Tandem OLED Apple panel, Apple display. It could also be the way Apple reintroduces 6K and 32 inches to the family, right? And that could then be the studio display Ultra XDR, right? Because of its pixel level brightness control and its higher pixel response times. If Apple wanted to, they could also give it an even higher refresh rate, right? Maybe 120 hertz still on the base model, but then on the Studio Display Ultra XDR, it could be their first 240 hertz model. So yeah, that would be interesting to see how Ultra plays out. So here Apple highlights the tech rather than signaling premium status. Yes, but also XDR has been in Apple's branding schemes for quite a while, specifically referring to the screens. But given that this is a device that's primarily screen, it makes sense to integrate it. But I would also argue, yes, if this was has been called, the problem is calling it a Studio Display Pro could have created some weirdness, right? Because that's like calling the Mac Mini with the M Pro chip the Mac Mini Pro, right? It's like putting a hat on a hat on a head at that point. Like it's confusing branding. Having the actual technology in there, it's similar to how they call the Apple TV 4K, the Apple TV 4K for supporting 4K. But at this point, 4K is so commonplace that it feels out of place to use that name. Way, can you adjust timings for live as it's late in India? It would be great even if live is scheduled 1 to 2 hours earlier. Well, I might try to do that on the weekends occasionally. The problem is obviously that on the weekdays I'm just coming home from work, right? And then I'll need to eat something. Sometimes I'll go to the gym before starting the stream when I have like an earlier work day, or once a week I have like a work from home day, like working with some scientific and medical stuff. This is the problem. Yeah, I know my live stream schedule is really bad, and I know watching live streams as like a VOD can be a little bit of a pain. A lot of my viewers are from India. Like, this channel started with a noticeable boost in India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, and partially Indonesia, right? So those were for a while like 80% of my viewers, but most of them joined as VODs, right? So I was really shocked because my live viewership, like, people were like, oh, I'm from the UK. Oh, I'm also from Germany. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm appealing to a European market, maybe a little bit to the United States. But then I watched like my viewership statistic, and it's like, it's South and Southeast Asia. Nowadays, my largest market is the United States, so that actually puts me more into the territory of actually streaming later in the day, as do my UK and Canadian viewers, unfortunately. So I don't think that I will start streaming necessarily much earlier, but I will consider streaming at least a bit earlier, specifically on the weekends. Apple added a higher-end tier to the lineup, continuing the pattern. Looking further ahead, other product lines will likely expand into the super premium tier, including the iPad and the iMac. Well, I hope the iMac does, and that's something that I really wanted to highlight today, because the actual details that Gurman lets on here are very underwhelming. But it also could be just a very incomplete picture. First, the ultra premium iPad is supposedly a high-end foldable OLED iPad. If you actually remember those rumors, you'll remember that a lot of them pointed that Apple was kind of co-developing a foldable iPad alongside a foldable iPhone, right? But then ultimately ended up prioritizing bringing the iPhone first to the market, and kind of pause their development on a foldable iPad that will be basically like an entry-level MacBook Pro in a way, in many ways, but then will be like a 12-inch panel that folds out into a 16-inch panel, something along those lines. Whether it gets a chip more closer to like an M Pro to go along a much higher, most likely base price, we'll have to see. We'll have to see what the accessory situation look like. Will there be a keyboard and trackpad basically forced upon you? Well, that's a lot for Apple to probably still decide. But yes, if they end up making that foldable iPad even at all, that will be a good fit for Ultra designation. Meanwhile, Apple continues experimenting with iMacs featuring beefier processors and larger displays. Now, here I 100% have to come out and say Apple does not need to make an iMac Ultra. And you know why? Because Apple fucking owes us an iMac Pro. And I'm not saying, oh my God, or at least they owe us bringing that 24-inch iMac firmly into the 27-inch era, which is now like 2 decades old. I do not know why Apple insists on this screen size, except for potentially pushing people to the Studio Display. Definitely not to the Studio Display XDR, which by itself costs like twice as much as an iMac, right? And needs obviously something like a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio to run it. So the iMac situation is really weird. Like, I like the 24-inch iMac. I think it has a good design. I think it even has a good size. But if you look at it on the website, right? First of all, it seems to not attract value buyers like one might think. You might think, oh, people like the Mac Mini, and this is basically a Mac Mini but with an attached screen. But you can attach your Mac Mini to pretty much any screen. You can get a 4K 120 hertz panel. You can get some crazy 240 hertz panel with 1440p if that's something you feel like more, right? You can use your already existing PC display, right? You can use 2 identical external screens rather than relying on one already set kind of unique 24-inch panel. It has a unique resolution, like right between 4 and 5K, right? If you look at the iMac, right, think about even these thick bezels. You could make this device 1 inch larger, just a little bit, right? And stretch that screen out to give it thinner bezels, or hell, just give it the bezels of the Studio Display. Just give it the screen of the base Studio Display. Even if it's not 120 hertz, at this point, I don't care. Now, yes, the problem is the Studio Display starts at $1,600, which is $300 more than the base price of the iMac. But think also of the things that are inside the iMac, right? Like the camera, like a speaker system, microphones. All of these, at this point, the Studio Display actually has more extensive port support than the iMac, because the Studio Display supports Thunderbolt 5. This is limited to Thunderbolt 4. Why not give us... But like, the problem is at that point the pricing of the base Studio Display makes no sense. If I were Apple, to be honest, I would unify the iMac and the base Studio Display. For a while, I would just offer them with 6K, with 5K regular panels, 27 inches, and one selling point that I would give is you can use this iMac as an external screen. And at that point, you can probably charge $2,000 with its base configuration. And if you really want to sell an iMac still that's cheaper, with a lower-end processor and everything, that is not usable as an external monitor, whatever, you can sell this to like the education market. But having only this in the lineup at this point almost feels insulting. It almost feels like Apple has kind of forgotten a very historic part of their lineup. I'm fine if they actually decide to cancel it. I'm fine with Apple selling just Mac Minis, Mac Studios, Studio Displays, Studio Display XDRs. I'm fine with that. But that, like, the iMac at this point feels confused, and it feels like like it's just not getting all the updates because Apple is just focused on everything else. So you're hurting the fans of the iMac by making them wait rather than just firmly pushing them towards the Studio Display, the Studio Display XDR, the Mac Mini, the Mac Studio. Like, if the iMac has to go and the Mac Pro has to go so the Mac Studio can run, I'm fine with that. Like, I know these are historic brandings that has existed during the Steve Jobs era, but they are not as unique as even the iPod. I would argue they're just subgenres of the Mac family. That's my pitch. You guys can let me know if you think I'm totally crazy for it, but I think either shit or get off the pod at this point, right? You don't keep making this same iMac. It's already bad, in my opinion, that the base Studio Display comes with a 5K panel without 120 hertz. I think if you made that panel 120 hertz, replace that A19 chip with an M5 or M6 chip at that point, you can keep using the same camera, speakers, microphones, right, which are part of the cost structure. That's my suggestion. Bet Mobile 220 saying, I fear it won't happen anytime soon with recent shortage and price increases on certain price. The only thing for sure every year is the base M variant of their next generation every October, November. You say that, but think about what happened with the MacBook Air, right? Apple found a way to compromise even with the crazy RAM storage. And in my opinion, I think they made the right balance, right? They gave you double the storage at $100 less, right? Which came, yes, with a $100 price increase. And yes, if ultimately you look at the actual exact lineup, you will see that the fully enabled M5 chip actually is now the same cost with the fully enabled M4, because for that one, you had to buy the 512 gigabyte configuration to begin with, right? So Apple found some clever tricks to give us more value. And think about it, that now happened on the MacBook Air. I think it's even better actually on the base MacBook Pro, right? Because that one was $1,599 with already the full M4 chip. And that one now gets still the full M5 chips, and it goes from 512 gigabytes to 1 terabyte, like everything nice basically about it. So yeah, I think that Apple still has wiggle room. At the very least, they need to upgrade that iMac to not start with 256 gigs of storage. Because think about it, right? Let's try to buy it because it wasn't updated. It's not up for pre-order. So let's go with the best color, blue, right? So look at this. You already have this weird difference. You have a multi-binned SoC. It's binned both in CPU and GPU. Technic official YT saying, bro, do you need a thumbnail designer for your channel? Well, if you're really good at it, join my Discord, let me know, or text me over on Twitter and send me some of your work. You'll find the link to both of that in the description. Or if you just want to support me, send me a super chat or become a channel member and give me some money to finance my thumbnails. But yeah, I make my thumbnails myself, and the problem with live streams, I make them really quickly just once I know the topics, and I usually make them on like 5 minutes on the toilet, and then I take a quick selfie of my surprise face or my angry face, and previously I used Memoji. So yeah, if you want to help out with that, that's something that I could use. But without losing track, super weird multi-bin chip, right? Now you're depending on more Thunderbolt ports to differentiate it. Mind you, while paying this $200 more to unbin your chip, you're still getting 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gig. Yeah, Turbo Ray, I mentioned that like I come home from work quickly, I read the Apple News while I'm in a newsroom, and then like while enjoying my time in the bathroom for a minute, I'll prepare it, right? Um, so 512 gigs, right? Can I get even this one with 512? Yeah, how stupid is this? Like, if Apple really, like, sure, if you really wanted to, like, maybe differentiate extra Thunderbolt, whatever, uh, you like at least bake into this the 512 gigabyte update. Trebore, congratulations being the number 3 streamer today. So Riley stays undefeated number 1 despite not even chatting, even though I'm not talking about AI today. But yeah, this I don't know who like, except for the education market. I don't know who buys this, to be honest. Like, it looks pretty and maybe like in an office space, but just in terms of value proposition, I struggle with accepting this. Look, I know it comes with a keyboard and a mouse or a trackpad, which for Apple might think this is a $200 value. But come on, right? At this point, we know that shouldn't be the consideration, because at that point, by that logic, the MacBook Air should be like $1,300. So yeah, let's see what Gurman has to say about the iMac before I keep on ranting too much. And the iMac, foldable iPad. Let's finish the iPad stuff. This approach is straight from the playbook of Chief Executive Officer Tim Cook. The company isn't introducing entirely new product. Instead, it's taking proven ones and stretching them across multiple price points to capture as much market share as possible. Very smart strategy. That Tim Cook fella, he's going places. It may sometimes feel like Apple sells too many Macs, iPhones, iPads, and AirPods. I think the only product where I occasionally feel like that is the Apple Pencil. I think that more choice here is actually better. Look, I know I don't subscribe to the Apple Pencil complaints online because I understand why Apple keeps selling them. That's because they obviously have different compatibility between different iPads. But in my opinion, that USB-C Apple Pencil is just stupid. And for even offering you can offer the Apple Pencil 1 as like an accessory for older iPads, but the fact that even the current iPads, like one of them, is supposed to like offer some compatibility with the Apple Pencil shop, right? Get the Apple Pencil Pro, the Apple Pencil USB-C. These are the current generation ones, right? You see the compatibility list, and then you see the legacy models. Apple does not sell the original? Oh yeah, you can. You can buy the Apple Pencil 1 and the Apple Pencil 2nd gen, but thankfully they're not prominently featured. And yeah, they even have like this graph to show you what the lineup, what supports what and stuff like that. Riley saying there's always Mac Mini plus a cheap screen. Exactly my point, Riley. We're perfect agreement here. But let me get back once again to Mark Gurman. Even something as simple as the Apple Pencil now comes in both lower and higher end versions, and it wouldn't be surprising if the MacBook Neo itself eventually expands into multiple variants, including perhaps a larger screen model. At that point, though, this now really would be like scratching on like the 13-inch MacBook Air, and that would unless it's $100 more, right? But then that asks the question, who's it really for? We'll have to see. Like Apple does not have like an iPhone 17e Plus. Apple does not have an like back in the day of the iPhone SE, they did not have an iPhone SE Plus. They do not have they do have the Apple Watch SE in different sizes, but that's because the Apple Watch is by its nature very size bound. Okay, we talked about the iMac, so let's actually talk about the iMac because before we talk about 3D printing materials. Apple planning to launch iMac refresh in new colors later this year. Now that Apple has unveiled the Neo and other key models, the 2026 Mac lineup is taking shape. Up next are upgraded Mac Studios, which are coming around the middle of the year. So probably around or even at WWDC. And then iMacs and Mac Minis. The touchscreen and OLED high-end MacBook is due around the end of the year. He does not, unfortunately, comment on the supposedly redesigned iPad mini that's going to be OLED based. The latest Mac Studio and Mac Mini models will look identical to the current iterations, while I'm told the pending iMac update will include a refreshed color palette. So after you guys saw me rant, right, on that iMac, do you really think that what this device needs, that already offers blue, purple, pink, orange, yellow, green, and silver, do you really think that this product, out of all its potential issues, the thing it really needs is a redesigned color palette? Grimbadango, how do you think M6 OLED will hold up long-term regarding burn-in? Don't forget, this is not just standard OLED, this is Tandem OLED. And also, I'll give a shout out to Monitor Unboxed, to Tim, the guy from Hardware Unboxed. So check that out. So just 3 days ago, he made like a 2-year experiment where he was testing his monitor for burn-in. And you'll be able to see that there is burn-in if you really double and triple down on the static elements. But mind you, this is an older OLED panel. This is with Windows, which can be even more aggressive about static elements and stuff like that. So yes, I think that it will be ultimately fine with Tandem OLED, and Apple will probably have some small pixel shift mitigation method, just as they have on the iPhone, to make sure that burn-in is reduced. And maybe something like the menu bar might, like maybe the Apple logo or whatever, could suffer a slight amount of burn-in, but then fundamentally it just won't up really mattering, like in the grand scheme of how you use your products. Okay. Technic saying, bro, I sent my portfolio on your Discord. Thank you, which I assume means we'll have a new Discord member right now. Oh, you sent it to me personally. Oh, no, you also joined here, right? Okay, yeah, good. I'll check it out. And see what you have to offer. I might not be able to look at it today, but maybe like throughout the week I'll find some time. Like right after this stream, I am taking a long phone call, so I apologize if I cannot respond to you directly. Denise, one of our MarkTech Pro members, joining and saying hi, and Riley saying, I hope the Mac Mini shows up soon. A 512 gigabyte version would be perfect. So obviously the Mac Studio is a little bit weird here, right? If we go to Apple's website, so obviously with the iMac, we've discussed it now plenty. Let me quickly reload it. There seems to be a little bit of an issue with the chat. Let me know always if there are any problems for you with the stream, whether it's with the chat or no, that this seems to be just a YouTube bug. Tipper is saying, do we think there's any low to idle use cases where the new performance cores will be less efficient than the old efficiency cores? Or did they move when the performance per watt curve overlapped and exceeded? That will have to be tested, Tipper. My personal belief is that it's probably gonna still be a little bit less efficient than the last E-cores, but they will be helping across a lot of use cases where the E-cores were probably too underpowered, but the P and now super cores might be a little bit overpowered, and they might instead interfere. And then, of course, don't forget, for stuff like watching video, right, you'll have like your decoders, your media engines, basically, to help out with battery in those extremely low power scenarios web browsing most of the time, your cores just probably won't flare up much, and you'll just be able to use the P cores at a very low frequency, and just maybe for like loading the website, maybe you'll use the super core just for a second, but then everything else, like the scrolling and everything, just will be able to fully rely on the P cores, while previously it would have relied on the previous P cores, or now super cores. But it will have to see. Apple has given pretty much the exact same battery life numbers for the M5 Pro and M5 Max. It's especially encouraging on the M5 Pro, because the M5 Pro gets more noticeably a larger CPU bump over the M4 Pro than the M5 Max gets over the M4 Max, but we'll have to see. So if we'll look at that lineup, the Mac Mini, obviously now this one is a very, very easy upgrade suggestion. M4 and obviously M4 to M5, M4 Pro to M5 Pro. But the biggest part here is, of course, where's the base price here? $599, but of course, 256 gigabytes, right? So this one, in my opinion, is going up to $699 and going up to 512 gigabytes, effectively presenting a $100 price reduction over the 512 gigabyte version. Unfortunately, you see that they're still quite available. In fact, the 256 gigabyte module seems to actually be more sold out, having 5 to 7 business days. 512 gigabyte version, just 1 to 2 business days. 1 terabyte the same, and the 2 terabyte model is just in stock. That's because I think it's just poor value. Like maybe $200 here is a price difference, but don't forget, this is like the M4, so it's slower storage. It's up to 3.5 gigabytes per second rather than now 7 gigabytes per second. We saw how much faster the storage on the new M5 MacBook Air is now. So yeah, I would recommend waiting. I personally don't think that any AI workload, like buy yourself like Claude Pro or Chat GPT Plus or whatever for the few months until the Mac Mini launches, and then buy the M5 version with its much faster AI acceleration, and use it to your heart's content. Don't buy the M4 at this point unless it's heavily discounted, right? Don't buy it at MSRP. And then, of course, the Mac Studio, that one actually has a little bit of a unique consideration because its storage is actually now completely out of whack when you look at what Apple is enforcing with the MacBook Pro. So you will see the M4 Max version, if that one, like, we'll just forget the M3 Ultra for a moment. Forget this exists, especially forget that this exists, right? For let's actually compare this for a moment, right? M2 Ultra, $7,000, right? Absolutely bananas. Like, what's even the base configuration? Tower, $500 for the rag version, whatever. $400 wheels. Wait, I thought the wheels were $700. Did I mistake that? I mean, it's completely overpriced either way. Like, even if you include like expensive packaging and whatever, you make it like $200 and you forget about it, right? Like $400 is very much stretching it, and I don't know why I thought they were $700. Feet, not wheels, and it's even the binned version. They are so greedy, they don't even give you the fully enabled M2 Ultra. And when you go with this configuration, you go with 64 gigs of RAM. This is slow 6400 mega transfers per second memory. Jesus Christ, is this a stupid product in 2026? Like, no amount of PCI, like, this isn't even really that fast of PCIe connectivity at this point. We do have PCIe 5 lanes and stuff like that now. Yeah, okay, let's look at the much more sensible product, the Mac Studio. You will see that it comes with 36 gigabytes. Let's not upgrade it. But you will see that it also now comes, currently comes with 512 gigabytes of base storage. In comparison to that, the M5 Max MacBook Pro actually forces you to go with 2 terabytes to go from M5 Pro to M5 Max. So that's beyond just the base configurations for the M5 Pro moving to 1 terabyte. Now the M5 Max forces you to get 2 terabyte. Now the storage is soldered onto the motherboard. It's not connected directly to the die as the memory, right? So Apple still could give you 1 terabyte of storage. But what Apple could also do is sneakily give you a bit more value while drastically increasing the MSRP, right? Instead of $19.99 as the base price and $25.99, mind you, for the version with wait, oh, I have to buy the storage extra? Oh, Jesus Christ. So this version, wait, I can only get 2 terabytes. Is that's still the binned version? Okay, I didn't click on anything wrong, right? Apple could make it like $23.99 and make it actually $200 less expensive, but now we're looking at a 20% price increase, right? And that probably will leave the M5 Ultra as a close to $5,000 purchase, or maybe Apple will like round it down to 4,500. But like, and maybe they won't actually change the storage, right? Maybe they'll just have 2 terabytes as the base configuration for both the M5 Max and the M5 Ultra. That will help keep their price gaps at least a little bit under control. But just saying, there is potential here for Apple to go really crazy with pricing. Let's finish what Mark Gurman had to say. So Mac Studio and Mac Mini will look identical. Obviously, the Mac Mini just got a redesign. The Mac Studio is not even that old as a product. And the iMac gets new colors. That makes sense, obviously. The other point that Mark Gurman briefly mentions here, it's not that important probably for us as end consumers, but in the end, it's something that contributes to Apple's pricing structure and everything and their logistic. Apple is working on 3D printed aluminum push for future products. The MacBook Neo relies on a new aluminum manufacturing process aimed at saving as much metal as possible. The approach drives down costs and speeds up production, but that's just the start. The company's manufacturing design team, along with its operations department, is working on ways to 3D print aluminum, which would bring more efficiency to the product of Apple Watch casings and potentially one day iPhone enclosures, I'm told. By the way, something that briefly came into my mind. Guys, if some of you are ardent, whether hobbyists, but preferably in some ways professional video editors, because Technic Official YT offered obviously his services for thumbnail creating. If any of you guys are editors and maybe even have a little bit of like a portfolio to point back to, or you know somebody, let them know, or you guys please know. And please also through the Discord or through Twitter, which both are linked again with this channel, let me know what is your pricing structure, how quickly do you work, right? And maybe like just a quick resume and who you worked for. It's not that I think of myself as very important, right? But I just cannot force myself to do video editing off my live streams. I know that that's absolutely necessary to find a broader audience. I've seen people tell me basically, I visit your channel and the last video, regular video that you have, not a live stream, is over a year old. What the F is up with that? I thought you were active here and stuff like that. Why do your live streams not have edits afterwards? That's how all my favorite live streamers handle it, right? I fully understand that. If any of you are editors or no editors and you're think you're sensibly priced, or whoever you're recommending is sensibly priced, let me know. That could help as well. Um, okay. The approach drives down costs, speeds up production, but that's just the start. The company's manufacturing design team, along with its operation department, is working on ways to 3D print aluminium, which would bring more efficiency to the production of Apple Watch casings and potentially one day iPhone enclosures, I'm told. Yeah, we already have like 3D printed titanium on the Apple Watch Ultra. We also have it for the charging port on the iPhone Air. So yeah, Apple has been doing more and more 3D printing rather than just like heat, I forget what the technical term is for the editing. When you basically start with a massive piece of metal and you cut into it, is it laser welding or whatever? That's where my English is just, it's just not a piece of wording that I use in day-to-day life. Let me know if I'm just stupid or maybe I'm spacing out. Obviously, I watched like the introductions of like the original aluminum unibody MacBook Air chassis, so I should have it in my head, but it's just not a word I often use. But yeah, 3D printing will allow Apple to also, of course, recycle more of those materials, make that production process more efficient, faster, and over time cheaper. So, and obviously Apple Watch Ultra 3 doesn't seem to have any notable compromises in like build quality or whatever. So seems like that process is working. And speaking actually of Apple's design team, it's actually a small change that has happened recently, but it's quite interesting. Apple has actually reshuffled a little bit of their leadership structure. Obviously, we still have all the familiar faces. We even have a new photo for Eddie Q, but primarily the main difference comes down to Molly Anderson and Steve LeMay now being on the leadership page to begin with, right? So during the time, of course, of Alan Dye, like he wasn't here, right? So maybe Apple is afraid that if they don't give their designers the well-deserved like recognition, they will leave just like Alan Dye for Meta. So Steve LeMay, it's a very small write-up here. Obviously, the main thing is that he's been at Apple since 1999. Attractive dude. Makes iPhones, iPads, Apple Watch, Mac, Siri, Apple Vision Pro. So he's been involved in a ton of stuff. And now he is the vice president of human interface design. And his counterpart in like hardware design, or as Apple calls it, vice president of industrial design, is Molly Anderson. Attractive gal, I guess. Molly Anderson is Apple's vice president of industrial design since joining Apple in 2014, so well over a decade. She has been involved in shaping many of Apple's most impactful products. Obviously, she has worked at other companies in the past, not necessarily the most impressive work before Apple, but obviously, like, she has a master's in design from the Royal College of Art. So, yeah. All good. Apple definitely is now being a little bit more responsive to some of the executive leadership change that they've gone through at the end of last year. As I told you, I don't think that Apple is close to falling anytime soon. Craig has probably another 5 years at the very least in his tank. If Eddie leaves, it honestly doesn't make Apple that much worse. Like, I guess somebody worse could come along, like, and I'm not saying Eddie is bad, but Eddie is responsible for monetizing all of Apple's services and stuff like that. So he will be a nickel and dimer in a way. Jaws and Deirdre, they will both be leaving, in my opinion, in the next 2 years or so, probably sooner. They're both retirement age. They've both been at Apple for decades and decades at this point. Hopefully, Johnny Cerrugi has at least another 5 years or so in him. I know, Riley, you're asking Craig for CEO, but don't forget, Craig is a little bit older than John Turnus, still young enough to be CEO, of course. But also, I just want a hardware guy to be in charge of Apple for a while. We'll have to see. Maybe at some point it will be necessary. Maybe Craig's successor could become the CEO after John Ternus, right? Maybe John Ternus makes Apple's hardware so great over his leadership, but then neglects software a little bit. So we'll have to correct that a little bit with a software guy taking charge. I personally think that Apple software is in a good spot. I know like people will complain about Liquid Glass or macOS Tahoe. I'm not John Gruber. I'm the anti-John Gruber. I acknowledge that Apple has bugs and problems in its operating system, just as they had in the days of yore, in the days of Steve Jobs. There were keynote presentations in Steve Jobs' era where he would stand in front of a giant list of bugs and tell you that they were now fixed, right? Apple might not be as open about that stuff because they do not have somebody with quite the presence of Steve Jobs who could tell people, oh, you're holding your iPhone 4 wrong. None of these people would be able to get away with that. Thankfully, that was also one downside of having this super larger than life CEO, founder CEO. Like, look at Tesla. What happens if you have a CEO who is essentially untouchable in his company and has a loyal group of sycophants as his fans who will pump up his stock and buy every bullshit product no matter how broken it is. So yeah, I think Apple's future looks good, and I think that John Ternus is a good potential SEO. But hey, if he does a poor job, maybe they'll do some Game of Thrones Red Wedding stuff and Craig ultimately takes over, or Johnny Cerrucci. There have been rumors that Johnny Cerrucci wants a really powerful position. Well, guess what? If John Ternus fails, we can just add a Y to the name on The Office and replace John with Johnny. We have actually a little bit of more news here. And thankfully, they also are coming from decent sources, especially this one. And we've talked about how, in some ways, I have been disappointed over the years with Min-Chi Kuo ever since he left his original outlet. But he has still provided solid leaks and rumors over the years that have mostly proven true. So here he is actually saying that Apple does plan to make a MacBook Neo 2. And now that I think about it, it's probably better to put that in the title than the price of the iPhone Fold, right? MacBook Neo 2 in 2027 with touchscreen. Probably a better second title for the video. But this is what Min-Chi Kuo is promising. Unlike This Week announced the MacBook Neo, an all-new Apple This Week announced the MacBook Neo, $599, education prices $499, competes with lower-cost Windows laptops and especially Chromebooks, correct, which are all way less powerful than the A18 Pro, but nobody thinks about that for some reason. Many of them actually are 8 gigs of RAM, right? Especially with the RAM apocalypse or Ramageddon, however you want to call it. I prefer Ramageddon. Yeah, I just think that it will be quite competitive, especially with the education prices, and especially after like maybe 3 months on the market, it gets like price discounted to like $550 for regular people. The M4 MacBook Air stops being really a thing in terms of the used, in terms of the discounted market, and we'll just move on from that. Okay, I'm just restarting my YouTube app. My chat just is working really weirdly. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, now it works perfectly. So A18 Pro makes all sense. These are just summaries. In a report shared last year, Apple analyst Min-Chi Kuo correctly said that the MacBook Neo would enter mass production in the fourth quarter of 2025. That's very much correct. The fact that it's launching now does suggest that it was in mass production at that point. The fact that it uses an A18 Pro chip also kind of suggests that. Min-Chi Kuo also correctly alluded to the fact that it would not feature a touchscreen. But in the same report, he revealed some insights into the second generation of the device, which I have forgotten now. So thank you to Mac Rumors for bringing that up. Crucially, Quo said that the second generation MacBook Neo may feature a touchscreen. To be honest, I find it strange if Apple gives the MacBook Pro touchscreen but not the other MacBooks. I think especially the 16-inch MacBook Pro is the worst Mac to give a touchscreen to. So we'll have to see. Like, this could be something that Apple really hammers home in throughout 2027, right? Oh, your MacBook Pro just got touchscreen? Well, guess what? Your MacBook Air gets the M6 chip, and it gets a touchscreen, right? It's still not getting ProMotion or active cooling or stuff like that, but it might get a touchscreen, which maybe it's not the greatest value add-on, but it's something that people have asked for. I also definitely don't see them doubling the RAM or the storage again, at least not without significantly increasing the base price. If Apple wants to price it at $11.99 and give us 24 gigs of RAM or something like that, again, if they go with LPDDR6, and that's LPDDR6 24-bit. Let's go to English. A deep dive. Oh my God, how deep is this deep dive? So LPDDR6 is more low power and everything. That's a fine speed increase. That makes sense. Introductory speeds are 10,667 or 10,700. Highest currently defined speeds is 14.4, but we've seen with LPDDR5 and LPDDR5X how that moves up. So if you look at it, the channel width here is 24 bits with two 12-bit subchannels. So you'll be able to combine storage quite nicely. Thankfully, it will not just be 24-bit intervals. It will actually be two 12 bits technically. So if you will have like one LPDDR6 introductory bandwidth, 32. Okay, yeah, that's... Is it really almost double the LPDDR5X standard, or over 50% more than actual LPDDR5.6 9600? A bit with some commands. This is a little bit too technical here. I mean, this is probably an interesting read if you have a little bit too much bowel movement. What is the effective bandwidth? Okay. 10,700 gigabits per second times 256 bits data. That's for Apple. That would be like the M Pro chip. Versus 288 on 288 bits transfers over 24 bits, 8 bits, and by 28.5 gigabits per second initially, 38.4 eventually on 14.4. Wait, and that's now double that of LPDDR5X 9600. Okay. What about those extra 32 extra bits per subchannel? That I don't know anything about. So we'll have to see. Like maybe Apple goes with larger memory buses, or just utilizes faster storage. So, like, there's a lot, but I don't think that these things are going to drastically redefine the value proposition of the next MacBook Air. Even if it is M6, even if it is using LPDDR6, right? If somebody of you is super technical, because I'll admit I have not yet done the deepest dive into LPDDR6. Mainly, it took me a while to even understand that it's built on those two 12-bit subchannels rather than separate 16 bits. So you feel free to let me know here, or who knows, join on Discord where we'll have even more in-depth discussion. Yeah, okay, good. This works, the Discord works nicely. Okay. Apple's first touchscreen Mac is expected to launch later this year. and MacBook Pro or MacBook Ultra with an OLED display and a new design. The device is specifically set to incorporate a touch panel that uses on-cell touch technology. On-cell touch technology integrates the touch sensors directly into the display panel's top layer, so it's very much like AMOLED, right? Rather than I guess it's Tandem AMOLED, dedicated touch layer, rather than requiring a separate dedicated touch layer to reduce thickness, which will also help with stuff like increased reflectivity and stuff like that, which usually comes along with having a touchscreen layer. It will still be worse than not having a touchscreen layer, even an integrated one, but it will be definitely better than something completely different, like a base iPad, which doesn't even have a laminated screen. As of September 2025, specifications for the second generation MacBook Neo were still under discussion. According to Quo, a faster chip such as the A19 Pro with 12 gigs of memory is highly likely. My rumor also is that the 256 gigabytes would also be much faster. My current speculation is that the MacBook Neo caps out at around 1.7 gigabytes per second. This one would bring you up to around 3.5. And the last major rumor for today is a product that I'm very much looking forward to, but it's also now, it feels so far out of our grasp because it seems to get pushed with every push of news theory. This is coming from the leaker and prototype collector known as Kosutami, so take that with a grain of salt, obviously. Saying it will offer a magnetic snap-to-wall feature and more. In a new post on X, Kotsutami said that one of the HomePod prototypes, so that's important. That doesn't mean that that's going to be the model that ultimately goes into production. It features a MagSafe-like snap-to-wall capability along with doorbell integration, which would also explain that Apple has been working on like door cameras and shit like that, smart home appliances. It's said to be heavily reliant on Apple Intelligence, which does explain its numerous delays at this point. Apple has reportedly been working on the device for several years with the aim for it to serve as a centralized location for controlling smart home products, listening to music and podcasts, making video calls. The device is expected to have a 7-inch square display and front-facing camera. And interestingly, Kosutami told MacRumors that while the name HomePad is being used internally, it's not clear if that is the product name that will ultimately be used upon launch. That's the funniest thing to me because I don't actually remember the name HomePad being a leak. I remember it kind of being like a creation by the community, but seems like Apple might have picked it up from the community, or the stars just aligned that it's such a perfect name that multiple people came up with the same idea, right? Like the combustion engine, right? Earlier this week, the leaker said that the HomePad is now set to arrive in the fall, so it kind of moved from a potential release last fall to a release this spring to now in a release this fall, which at that point I really hope it has at least an A18 chip and 8 gigs of RAM, which ultimately would give it very similar capabilities to the MacBook Neo. I highly assume that A18 chip would be highly bent and everything, but it's still interesting to consider that. Obviously, if you really want the best Apple Intelligence right there, you're going at least with an A19 chip, right? But we'll have to see also how much of that Apple Intelligence will be on device, how much will be relegated to Apple's private cloud compute servers. We'll have to see. But let's hope it doesn't get delayed any further, because a full, like, I'm not even using the word delay as like accusatory. It's not like Apple Intelligence Siri, right? Which was introduced, which was shown off and then ultimately really delayed, right? And actually in a quite public and embarrassing showing for Apple. But overall, I would argue it's still a little bit bad. I hope that what this sounds honestly is that this device is not gonna be a replacement for my beloved big HomePod, because I really want something with the best sound quality. I refuse to buy a HomePod 2, specifically because I'm not sure about its Apple Intelligence capabilities going forward. I hate that it has Wi-Fi 4. It's kind of a side grade to the HomePod 1, where it actually has, I believe, one fewer speakers inside, but it compensates for that with a different sound profile. So I would love a proper big HomePod speaker. Obviously, we know that the new HomePod Mini has been in the works, TV and home. The HomePod Mini being obviously a $100 product. It can be super colorful. I'll assume the next generation has a new color palette for Apple to advertise it and stuff like that. But my beloved here has been woefully neglected. The much more expensive and much more premium big HomePod, or HomePod Biggie instead of HomePod Mini, as I sometimes call it around here. It's funny that the first thing that shows up here is Apple Care. Is $299. I would gladly take a price increase to $300 given the inflation that we've seen thus far. And hopefully this will come with Apple Intelligence. Hopefully this will come with even better speakers. But unfortunately, neither Mark Gurman nor other leakers really comment on it that much. It seems to be HomePod Mini will get like a maybe new MediaTek Wi-Fi 6 chip. It's seemingly not getting Apple's in-house Wi-Fi 7 modem, DN1. That's a bit of a bummer, but at least it's still rumored to be $100. Clearly cheaper, clearly designed to be more put it everywhere in your home friendly rather than this much more expensive, much bigger product. We'll have to ultimately see. I love it. Please give it a Wi-Fi 7. Please give it full compatibility also with a new Apple TV 4K, right? That way the eARC compatibility between them would be perfect. Like obviously the TV to the Apple TV would be connected via HDMI anyway. Hopefully at that point HDMI 2.1, and then you'll have the super low latency, super high speed audio throughput, and then that will also make potentially allow for a multi HomePod setup that goes beyond two, right? You could have potentially two big HomePods as like your front-facing speakers, maybe two HomePod minis in the background or something like that. Would be all cool, and Apple definitely has the expertise to make it work, but they just refuse to put in just that extra amount of work to push these products and these features over the finish line. Let's see if there's anything else I missed. MacBook Ultra with touchscreen, higher price. That's not surprising. That's something we just reacted to. 9 to 5 Mac. MacBook Ultra. Okay, you guys see everyone is reacting to the Mark Gurman newsletter, as are we. So that's totally understandable. We're about 2 hours into the stream, so I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. I'll be back tomorrow if there are some reviews dropping of new products, but I cannot guarantee at which time I'll be back. So last week I shuffled my work that I'll be finished by about 3:15 p.m. and then I was able to run home and start at 4 p.m. This week I'm having just regular work days from like 7:30 a.m. to like usually around 4 p.m. So will be a little bit more later, right? But not necessarily that much, maybe at 5 p.m., maybe at 6 p.m. Obviously, if the reviews drop much later, I'll adjust my timing to that. So I don't just sit in front of you without having anything to say. And before, of course, I leave you, I'm giving you some big Mark action, and I'll promise I'll be shaved tomorrow. I really enjoyed this week. I haven't streamed every day in a week, I believe either ever or at least in like 2 years. So that was a great challenge for myself, and I've been greatly awarded by your attention, by your generosity, even by becoming channel members and stuff like that. So that means the world to me. To anyone who is either still watching live or in the VOD, please do all the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way you will be notified when I'm going live next. Like this video to help it in the algorithm. Share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment. Don't just comment live. That's one lesson I'm trying to teach all of you. Also, just leave a hi or a little bit of a thumbs up afterwards. Shout out again to all of our MarkTech Pro, now the MarkTech Pro Max members. I already gave a shout out to MarkTech Pro members early in the stream. So shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max, Maximus, and Jonathan. And of course, to all of you, if you want to support me directly like they all do, leave a super chat, leave a super sticker, leave a super thanks or whatever it's called when the video is uploaded, or consider becoming a channel member right here on YouTube or a supporter over on Patreon. Beyond all that, join our Discord, join my Twitter. You'll find the links to all of that in the description of this channel. There's just like a link, basically like subsection, and if you click on it, you'll see all of them separately. It looks a little bit differently from like the iPhone app to the iPad app to the website, so you'll have to adjust a little bit. Denise saying great work. Well, thank you so much, Denise, for just becoming a channel member yesterday. Means the world to me. Shout out to all of you just for watching, just for liking, just for being part of this amazing community, and I'll hope to catch you soon. This is Mark Tech tuning out.